All right, so this video, I said I was going to talk about my Uncle Keith. But before I get into that, I feel like it's necessary to kind of preface this with my early childhood and just how close my family was. The vast majority of my family well, immediate family, on my mom and dad side, everybody's from the St. Louis area. I'll say that. So on my dad side, my dad is the oldest child. Then it's my Aunt Joyce, my Uncle Will, my Uncle Lonzo. And then on my mom's side, my mom is the oldest. My Uncle Glenn, my Uncle Keith, my Aunt Pumpkin, and my Uncle Trevor. So at this point, like everybody's always around each other. And also great aunts, great uncles, cousins. On my mom's side of the family, it's like they pretty much had a street. So in Washington Park, 45th Street, is like my Uncle Terry's down the corner, my Aunt Barbara stay next to him, my grandmom stay on the other side of the street, so just a lot of family. So that's how my early childhood was. And then my parents moved us to Michigan. My Uncle Lonzo wasn't there. He had went to college. He played football. My Uncle Will had went to the military, had a family in San Diego. My Aunt Joyce married someone in the military. My Uncle Emmanuel, so like they were wherever they were. So like everybody went their own ways and started their lives. So that's where it was like the separation. When I was young, so my grandfather on my dad's side is not his biological father, but that's the only, like, that's the grandfather. That's really the only grandfather that was in my life my entire life, because my mom's dad was in prison pretty much my entire life. And my grandpa Ike, which is Pumpkin and Trevor's dad, he was around but kind of like in and out, similar to my dad. So my dad wasn't around, grandfathers weren't around, uncles weren't around, with the exception of my Uncle Keith. Trevor doesn't count because he was a kid the same age. The thing that I felt like was unique about my Uncle Keith was it didn't matter. On both sides of my family, it seemed like everybody was close. So he was around. Whether I was with my mom, whether I was with my dad, my Uncle Keith was around. When my mom, because I think like my mom and my grandma, kind of, when we were young, when I say young, elementary, middle school, the majority of that time, because they would alternate like kids in the summer. One summer, my mom would get my aunt and uncle, and they would come stay with us. One summer, my mom would send us to St. Louis to stay with my grandma for the summer. But my Uncle Keith was always around. Like if we were in Michigan, he would be in Michigan. If we were in St. Louis, he would be in St. Louis. When I was living with my mom after my parents separated, he was around, with my mom. When I moved with my dad, he was around with my dad. He was just always there. A little bit of background. So my Uncle Keith so my grandma basically got two sets of kids, the same way I do. It seemed like it's kind of a common thing. So you got the adult set of kids, which was my mom, Uncle Glenn, my Uncle Keith. Then it's a big gap, and then it's Pumpkin and Trevor. So my Uncle Keith was the youngest of the older group of kids, and he had sickle cell anemia, so he was in and out the hospital a lot. Didn't have great health. I remember, a lot of times would have jaundice real bad. Because when I was a kid, stuff like that stood out. Like his eyes would be super, like the whites in his eyes would be yellow or sometimes like close to almost brown because he was sick. And I was young. I didn't understand a lot of stuff, but I just know sometimes he would go to the hospital and they would tell us he in the hospital. He'd be in the hospital for a few days, a week or whatever. He'd get out the hospital and, but he was always around. I remember he moved away a couple times and did his thing, but he would always kind of come back around, either be around with my grandma or be around when we were with my mom. Because he was the youngest, he was the closest in age, and I feel like him and Devin were. I feel like that's the person Devin was closest to. And I could be wrong, but that's just my opinion. I feel like Devin, like where I was searching for or longing for a big brother, and I feel like even though it was our uncle, I feel like my uncle Keith was Devin's big brother. Like that's how I wanted Devin to be. That's how my uncle Keith was for Devin. But again, he spent time with all of us. We didn't do a lot when we were young. We didn't have a lot. So just the conversations, just the quality time, the advice. I was listening to my brother Devin the other day, and how so across the board, anybody that knew my dad knew his mentality was basically you can do whatever you willing to pay the consequences for. And then the flip side of that coin, my uncle Keith was, you know, like you only get in trouble if you get caught. So um I remember he typically didn't keep a certain job for a long period of time or have like what you would consider a career, because he was always sick and he was always traveling, going back and forth. I felt like my relationship with my sister really emulates the relationship my Uncle Keith had with my mom. The way he was there for her, I've been there for my sister. The way he was there for us, I've been there for my nephews. And so at this point in time, it's my senior year in high school. I'm a manager at Popeyes. This shortly after I turned 18, which my birthday is December 20th. So I remember my 18th birthday because I went over to my aunt's house and got blackout drunk. 18. It wasn't a lot of people there. And that's kind of sidebar. Like my birthday never has been important, or I felt like my birthday was never important to anybody because it's 5 days before Christmas and it always got overshadowed. A lot of times it was like this, and I'm not even a materialistic person. It's just the thought. It was always overlooked. If there's been plenty of times where Christmas coming up and people like, oh, snap, I forgot your birthday. Like, my bad, happy belated birthday. So my 18th birthday is one of the few birthdays that I actually have a memory of. I don't remember the majority of it. I remember what I was told the next day. I remember the beginning of it. I went down to my aunt Pumpkin's house. She had some Christian brothers. So she poured me a cup like it was a cup of Kool-Aid. I always loved playing spades. My grandma was there. My Uncle Keith was there. My Aunt Pumpkin and one of her friends. So that was really the last time I got to really spend with my uncle. And I hate that I don't remember half of it. So my 18th birthday, go over there, I got drunk. And by the time I got to where I couldn't remember stuff, the next day everybody was just telling me, my uncle, I was just like, Uncle Keith, he had to drag me to the bathroom. I'm throwing up like crazy. I remember the next day when I woke up, I smelled the alcohol coming out of my pores. It was terrible, but that was like the last, memory of my Uncle Keith. It was my 18th birthday. So a few months after that, my Uncle Keith passed, and that's kind of where things fell apart. For me, it was a major shift because I already discussed my opinion of school. It wasn't really a big deal to me, but I did always want to go to the University of Michigan, which I probably had an opportunity to do because I was smart. My Uncle Keith died, and I just stopped going to school because there was nobody to make me go to school because, I was living on my own. Now, when he died, I remember I got a call from my aunt, Pumpkin. And the thing about St. Louis and East St. Louis, on the Missouri and the Illinois side, it's a King's Highway. So that's the street. And, she telling me, basically, if I want to see my uncle, I need to get to the hospital. So I'm trying to find his hospital. And this is like this before we were so dependent on cell phones and stuff. So, it's not plugging into the GPS and, it's going to take you there. This is 2001. So it's, I'm just trying to find this hospital. And so I'm driving up and down Kings Highway, up and down Kings Highway. Like, I don't see, like, what is she talking about? And I can't get in contact with anybody because everybody is, trying to get to the hospital or whatever. So I didn't get to see my uncle before he passed. So I didn't make it to the hospital before he passed. And then my aunt Punkin had me come over her apartment, and she was just asking me was I all right, and I just remember just flat out just saying no, and I just went in and laid in her bed and just laid there. So I didn't cry. I don't feel like I really could process my emotions, and I don't know how long it was from the time he passed until the funeral, but from the time he passed until his funeral, I didn't do anything. Even though I had moved out, I went to my grandparents' house, and I went back in the basement because that's where I lived at when I was with my grandparents. And I remember it was this old computer, back in the day when you put CDs in the computer. And I was just sitting in the basement in the dark for days, listening to, so this is when TP2.com was out. So I was listening to The Storm Is Over on repeat. If you haven't heard that song, it's one of my favorite songs. But anyway, so I'm listening to The Storm Is Over on repeat, just, kind of trying to process the fact that I just lost my uncle. And not just my uncle, the uncle. Because with my uncles, I didn't have a relationship with my Uncle Will at all. I never did. And he passed a couple years ago, a little bit before my dad. But I didn't really know him. I saw pictures of him. I've probably been around. I mean, obviously I've been around these people when I was young, but no relationship. My Uncle Lonzo was like the uncle that I idolized because he was a football player and he played college ball. I remember taking a trip to go see him play ball at Arizona. So, and then he got drafted to the NFL. So it was the uncle that was like the celebrity uncle. Even though I didn't see him that much, is like my uncle, a football player type thing. So my Uncle Glenn, he was the uncle that was, running with my dad. Like they drink, they party, he was very similar to my dad. They gonna wreck cars, they gonna fix cars, they gonna work on cars, they gonna, do all of that stuff. But my Uncle Kieth was the uncle that was gonna babysit us. He was the uncle that, I was gonna listen to. He told us stories. I remember so many like stories, and I don't even know that he was telling me the stories. It's just that I heard him talking to other people at a time where I didn't understand a lot of stuff he was talking about. But it was just funny because he was telling me stories. Even to this day, when I think about what he was trying to teach me, and it's like, so that's what I try to do with my nephews, and I hope that I have a similar impact. So now the funeral comes up. Now, to this point, I haven't shed a tear. I haven't really discussed it. And I get ready for the funeral. I got a suit, trench coat. I walked to the church. And as soon as I got to the door, it was real. I just broke down. Like, even right now, which I didn't think this would be an issue, but I'm kind of getting emotional. So I get to the church, and it's just like waterfalls. Like, can't stop crying. I don't remember anything in the funeral other than I couldn't stop crying. So he knew what was coming. He was sick. My mom knew what was coming. They had like worked on his, whatever you call it, the thing for the funeral. So they did that together. He prepared that before he passed away and left messages for all of us. So that was the first time in my life where I experienced a loss like that. It was the first time death was not the concept of death, but the impact of death was real. I remember going to funerals, like old people funerals. Um, I had a conversation with my mom one time because she told me I was too young to remember my great grandfather, my grandmom's dad. And I did remember going to Sykeston. I remember his funeral. Um, I remember being in his house. I remember what the house looked like. I remember him smoking his pipe. I remember his harmonica, all that stuff. I was really young. So like death didn't hit me at the time. I was at a funeral, like old people was crying and whatever, So, but this was the first time I'm old enough to process. So this is the first time at the end I didn't deal with it well. And I can't say ruin my life, but I ruined my opportunities at that point in time because I just shut down and stopped going to school. I was like, I wanted to go to Michigan my whole life, to U of M. And now I don't care. I don't care about anything because I don't know how to process this. So that event probably caused me to not graduate on time, to not go to college, out of high school, to not go to the military, because I was going to go to the Marines. I always wanted to be a Marine. And I was in a delayed entry program. My recruiter, Sergeant Fenderson, he would take me to the range. I would go work out. I was so gung-ho about being a Marine because my brother was in the Air Force. Devin was in the Air Force, and like the Air Force that was the soft branch of the service, So I wanted to be, the hardest one. I wanted to be a Marine, but I didn't go to school for like 3 weeks. And then I couldn't graduate on time. They were sending my grandmom letters. My grandmom calling me like, dude, what's going on? Like, these people calling me, you don't live here. They, sending me letters that I got to come show cause why you're not at school, what's going on. But at this point, I'm taking care of myself. I live on my own. So it was really nobody to make me go to school or do anything. So I just was working. And so I didn't graduate on time. I had to call my recruiter, Sergeant Fenderson, and then he called Staff Sergeant Johnson. So I'm on the phone with my Marine Corps recruiter, Sergeant Fenderson, and then his supervisor, Staff Sergeant Johnson. And again, this back in the day, this 2001. So I'm telling them what's going on. Hey, my uncle passed. I had a rough time with it, and I missed too many days of school. So I'm not going to graduate on time because I was already, I had my ship date, June 16th, 2001, I was shipping off to Paris Island. So now that's down the drain. So I'm trying to explain this to them on the phone on three-way. And while we're on the phone, it's, PFC young. We understand these things, stuff happen. The Marines not going anywhere. Take care of your business, do what you got to do. Because I told them I knew exactly what I had to do to graduate. Because I had all my credits. I just missed too many days. So they told me I had to do 2 correspondence courses. So I picked some easy classes. It was science fiction for readers, some stupid stuff that I just had to read some books and then go take some tests. So I'm I'll knock this out. And then at the end of the summer, I'll ship out. So it was, take care of what you got to take care of. We'll be here. The Marines not going anywhere. We'll just take care of it at the end of the summer. So then they thought they hung up the phone. Now, Sergeant Fenderson never switched up. I didn't enlist in the Marines. And obviously, I was a teenage kid, so it's not like we were friends. So we fell out of contact after I decided not to go to the Marines. But I decided not to go to the Marines because once they thought the phone hung up, then it's this conversation where Staff Sergeant Johnson is talking so much crap about me. and Sergeant Fenderson defending me. But it was just like, again, it's 2001, and I'm 18-year-old kid getting ready to go to the Marines, and I hear the Marines just talking crap like, oh man, so this is Staff Sergeant Johnson telling Sergeant Fenderson that basically I'm just making an excuse because, my uncle dying is my uncle dying, but like I'm too smart, I'm too gifted. I did all this because in high school I played football, I wrestled, I did a lot of stuff, and then plus I've been training with these people for a while, and I was one of the only recruits that could do the vast majority of stuff. I was never great running, but everything else, like doing all the physical stuff, I could do. I just needed to work on my 2 mile. So he like, man, that kid too strong, too driven, too this, too that, too smart, all of this. So really, he just full of shit. He's just a pussy, right? So I'm listening to this because they thought they hung up on me, and I'm just like, so that was the moment I decided I wasn't going to the Marines. So now I didn't graduate on time. I didn't enlist in the Marines. At the time, like I said, I wanted to go to U of M. I ruined that because I was just so depressed. I had my recommendations and everything, but I was supposed to write an essay, and I just couldn't write this essay. I kind of packed it in. So I applied to Michigan State. I got accepted. I applied to Baylor. I got accepted. I didn't go to college. I was like, forget it. So now I'm just working. Graduated high school, and I'm a manager at Popeyes. Just trying to make the most out of this stupid situation. But ultimately, like, that was one of the most important things that happened. But prior to him passing, like, again, I just had so many memories of my uncle and so many conversations and lessons that really to this day, I think about. I can't share all of them, but it's a couple like funny stories that I remember, him telling me just about stupid stuff, him and his friends drinking, smoking weed, like being so high that, they out there, like you cut the grass. He's like, they out here measuring the grass, trying to see if the grass stayed even after it started growing back after you cut it, like stupid stuff like that. But, it made an impression. Or how one time he ran or did a rolling stop at a stop sign and got a ticket. So out of spite, he gonna run the next stop sign and get another. It was just like so much stupid stuff. So basically, he was just telling me like, man, don't double down on mistakes. If you do something and you get in trouble for it, it's not gonna help you to respond in anger and do something else stupid, because it's just gonna get you in more trouble. And that was really like, that was my uncle. And then he was always the referee with me and Devin. I was listening to Devin yesterday, and because I asked him, what his opinion of it. And it was ironic to me that he said, I turned into a bully, because Devin is really the only person that I wanted to fight. So I don't see how I could be a bully to my big brother, but it was because I felt like he was a bully, and I felt like he bullied me and he bullied my sister. And at this point, me and Crystal were close. So Crystal tell me Devin did something to her, I want to fight. He don't understand that, but most of the stuff stemmed from it's just, you can't be a bully, and I'm not a little kid no more. So it is all of this kind of resentment, animosity that's built up over years because I couldn't do anything about it. But now I can, and you don't want to fight. You wanted to fight because it's 4-year gap and you was bigger than me, and like when it wasn't fair, you wanted to fight. But now that I can hold my own, you don't want to fight. So I didn't agree with that. But my uncle will always be the one in the middle. When I'll be wanting to fight Devin, Kieth would be the person trying to, talk us both out of fighting and trying to explain to me that I don't need to be trying to fight Devin and all of this stuff. So that was still to this day probably until my grandma passed, the most significant loss that I had. And that really was at a critical time and influenced a lot of things to where my life would be completely different if my uncle just didn't pass at the time that he passed. And my life would also be completely different if I didn't have the benefit of all the advice, all of the investment of time, energy, and effort from my uncle to be there for me, to teach me stuff, to guide me, to give me advice, to support me. Even at times, I think I mentioned like my dad would steal my stuff. So once Devin abandoned me, and I'm gonna stop saying that, but that's how I felt at the time. But it is what it is. But once Devin left, they was still in the same city, so they would come down to the apartment. He didn't live there, but I just felt like it was always just messed up situation. Devin wasn't doing nothing for me or to help me. So my Uncle Kieth was the person that I would talk to. I remember he would come down to the apartment. We was in the projects. And at this time it was bad. Even though we're family, our experiences have been completely different as the kids, because Crystal stayed with my mom. So I don't know what her life was like when she was with my mom and I wasn't there. Devin left, so he doesn't know what my life was like. I don't know, but at this time, it was really a terrible situation. My dad already wasn't a dad. My brother abandoned me. My brother Timmy, I couldn't really hang out. Well, I can't say hang out because we still hung out all the time, but it was drama because it was some type of beef between his mom, boyfriend, and my dad and my brother. So my Uncle Kieth was always like the stabilizing force. And that I love that dude. I miss that dude. And probably more than anybody else, like my Uncle Kieth is really the only person throughout my entire life that like we never had a negative interaction. He never hurt my feelings. He never did anything wrong to me. He never let me down. He was always there for me. He always had my back. And if I could be close to as good of a uncle to my nieces and nephews and I'll say right now, I've already come up short by comparison with my nieces and nephews. And that's life. I think he was able to do that because he didn't have a family, he didn't have kids, and that was by choice. He didn't want to have kids because he was sick and he knew he wasn't gonna live till old age. But I was young, so I didn't expect him to pass that early. But that was always, I think, in the back of his mind. So he never wanted to have kids, and because he didn't, he had the freedom to do what he did as an uncle. I don't, because I do have kids, so it's a little bit different. But I do know he set the standard very high, and I'm trying my best to be even close to as good of an uncle as he was. So that was kind of the shift in my life of kind of everything being on track, school good, working in management, and then my Uncle Kieth died and my life freaking fell apart. So I'll get back to just talking about me on the next one and pick up, after this, as far as what was going on with me, work, school, life, and all of that. But yeah, my Uncle Kieth was really that dude, and I miss him and I love him, and man, I just hope that I can make him proud.